Dr. Arden Vailcrest was already drained when the trauma pager sounded once again. Its sharp ring echoed through the otherwise quiet hospital corridor, sending a fresh surge of urgency through her tired body. Her gaze lifted to the clock on the wall, and a tight knot formed in her chest. It was the morning of her wedding. In only a few hours she was meant to be standing inside a hotel ballroom, dressed in white, waiting to walk down the aisle toward Lucan Vailcrest. That thought vanished the moment the emergency department doors flew open and a stretcher was rushed inside. A young boy lay on it, barely breathing, his skin pale and damp. His parents hurried alongside, their faces filled with fear and desperation. A nurse urgently announced that the child was in septic shock, and that his organs were beginning to fail. Arden did not hesitate or ask for clarification. She stepped forward at once, mentally preparing for surgery. Dr. Marlowe, the head surgeon, looked directly at her and asked if she could take the case immediately. The question felt heavier than it should have. For a brief second, everything around her seemed to fall silent. She pictured her mother, Eloan, waiting at home to help her get ready. She imagined Lucan at the hotel, likely preparing for the ceremony. She had promised both of them that she would arrive on time. Then her eyes returned to the boy on the stretcher. He was fading quickly. Without wavering, she answered that she would take the case and began giving instructions. Inside the operating room, time seemed to lose meaning. Every moment demanded complete focus. Arden led her team carefully through each critical step. At one point, the child's heart rate dropped and the alarm sounded sharply, but she refused to give up on him. Sweat soaked through her scrubs and her hands ached from strain, yet she did not slow her pace. After 4 long hours, the situation finally stabilized. The monitor settled into a steady rhythm. The child was still alive, fragile and not yet safe but alive. Arden leaned back slightly, feeling the full weight of what had just happened. She had saved him. The relief did not last. Her phone, left inside her locker, had been vibrating repeatedly. When she checked it, she saw dozens of missed calls, all from Lucan. The ceremony had begun without her. She removed her gloves and hurried to change into the simple white dress she had kept at the hospital. There was no time for makeup, no bouquet waiting in her hands. She tied her hair back quickly and rushed to the parking garage. As she drove toward the hotel, her heart pounded. She kept reminding herself that Lucan loved her, and that he understood the demands of her work. He would understand this as well. He had to. She did not know that by the time she reached the hotel, everything would already be shattered. Arden arrived at the Grand Crest Hotel with her pulse echoing in her ears. The building glowed under soft golden lights. Guests stood outside in small groups, smiling and laughing as if nothing were wrong. For a brief moment, relief washed over her. The wedding was still taking place. She had not missed it entirely. Holding the edges of her simple dress, she stepped out of the car. She had barely taken 2 steps when several people moved directly in front of her, forming a barrier across the entrance. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking her path. It was the Vailcrest family, relatives of all kinds, some she barely recognized. Every one of them looked at her as though she no longer belonged. Coraline Vailcrest, Lucan's mother, stood at the front. Her arms were tightly crossed, her lips pressed into a thin, cold line. In a loud voice, she remarked that Arden had finally decided to appear. Arden forced herself to remain calm and explained that she had been performing emergency surgery because a child had been dying, and she could not abandon him. Coraline responded with a sharp laugh and accused her of always having an excuse, adding that on this day of all days she should have known exactly where she belonged. Arden replied quietly but firmly that she had belonged in the operating room because someone's life had depended on her. Lucan's older sister stepped forward and argued that another doctor could have handled the case, suggesting that Arden had chosen work over family. A wave of anger rose inside her, yet she kept her voice steady and answered that the child would not have survived if she had walked away. Coraline shook her head with visible frustration and accused Arden of acting superior because she wore a white coat. She declared that Arden had humiliated her son in front of everyone. Arden insisted that she had humiliated no one, and that she had been saving a life. Coraline moved closer, her eyes burning, and reminded her that Lucan had been left standing alone at the altar, asking if she understood how that had made them appear. Arden tried to look past them toward the hotel doors and said that she needed to speak to Lucan and explain everything to him personally. Coraline stepped directly into her way and stated that there was nothing left to explain and that Arden did not get to decide otherwise. For years, Arden had tried to earn Coraline's approval. She had cooked for family gatherings, endured critical remarks about her long hours and lack of time for housework, and listened as Coraline praised Lucan's childhood friend Seraphine for being gentle and proper. She had ignored the warning signs because she loved Lucan. Now all of it seemed to collapse at once. One of Lucan's cousins leaned closer and loudly suggested that Arden believed she was too important for their family. Her chest tightened as she responded that she had given everything to them: her time, her patience, and her respect. Coraline dismissed her words and declared that real respect meant putting family first rather than choosing strangers over one's husband. Taking a slow breath, Arden asked where Lucan was. Coraline smiled in a way that made Arden's stomach drop and informed her that Lucan was inside with his wife. Arden froze, unable to process the meaning of those words. Coraline repeated slowly that Lucan was married, and that he had chosen someone who understood how to be a proper wife. It felt as if the ground had vanished beneath Arden's feet. She thought about everything she had sacrificed for him. Late nights at the hospital, missed dinners, holidays spent on call, and wondered if this was what it had meant to him. With her voice shaking, she said that she needed to hear the truth from Lucan himself. Coraline responded that he did not wish to see her. Behind them, the hotel doors opened, and the sound of music drifted into the night, followed by laughter, applause, and the faint tapping of a microphone beginning another celebration. Her wedding was taking place without her. Then a deep, powerful engine sound cut through the air behind them. The noise grew louder and heavier as a long black Rolls-Royce pulled up behind the crowd. Its polished surface reflected the golden hotel lights and the stunned expressions of everyone standing there. The car door opened slowly. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark tailored suit. His face showed exhaustion, yet there was a quiet authority in his posture that made people instinctively straighten. Two men stepped out behind him, followed by a young assistant. Everyone in the city recognized him. It was Evander Kessler. Before anyone else could speak, he walked straight toward Arden, his eyes fixed on hers as if nothing else existed around them. He addressed her respectfully, telling her that he had been searching for her. Arden immediately recognized him as the man she had seen earlier that morning pacing the hospital hallway while she was in surgery. His voice thick with emotion, he thanked her sincerely for saving his son. He told her that if she had not been there that day, his child would not be alive. Then he bowed his head slightly in gratitude. A visible wave of shock passed through the Veilcrest family. Coraline's face turned pale. Lucan's relatives stared at Arden with wide, stunned eyes. Evander turned toward the crowd and positioned himself in a way that shielded Arden. Calmly, he asked who had just been telling this woman to leave. No one answered. Coraline forced a strained smile and claimed that there had been a misunderstanding, adding that Arden was family. Evander looked at her coldly and replied that family does not humiliate someone who has just saved a child's life. Arden felt her heart pounding as everything that had happened only moments earlier suddenly felt exposed in the open. Evander turned back to her and gently asked whether she would come with him for a moment, adding that she looked as though she needed space. Before Arden could respond, Coraline stepped forward and said that they should talk. Arden did not even look at her. She walked directly toward the Rolls-Royce. As she passed the Veilcrest family, she could feel their eyes fixed on her. Only minutes before, they had treated her as though she were worthless. Now their confidence had shifted into something closer to fear. Inside the car, Arden released a shaky breath. Her phone began to buzz. It was Lucan. She stared at the screen briefly before answering. Lucan immediately asked where she was and said that his mother claimed she had made a scene. Arden repeated the word scene in disbelief and reminded him that she had arrived straight from surgery, only to have his family block her from entering her own wedding. Lucan sighed and said that she knew how his mother could be, that she had panicked, and that the situation with Seraphine had only been meant to calm her down. Arden asked quietly whether he had said the vows. There was a pause before he admitted that he had. She responded that he had replaced her. Lucan lowered his voice and insisted that he had not meant it that way. Arden closed her eyes and stated clearly that he had stood at the altar with another woman while she had been saving a child's life. Silence followed. That silence told her everything. Evander watched her with concern as she ended the call. She was no longer confused. She was finished. The car slowly pulled away from the hotel. Through the tinted glass, Arden could still see the Veilcrest family standing together in a tight group on the sidewalk. Coraline was speaking rapidly to someone, but none of them looked confident anymore. Evander Kessler sat across from her in the quiet luxury of the back seat, and told her gently that he was sorry she had been forced to go through that. Arden nodded and said that she had not even been given the chance to walk inside. Evander replied that she should never have been treated in that manner, especially while she had been saving his son as others stood there judging her. Her phone buzzed again. It was Lucan. She did not answer. Evander leaned back slightly and said that he did not want to interfere in her personal life, but when he saw the way she was being spoken to outside that hotel, he could not remain silent. Arden looked at him and thanked him sincerely. They drove quietly for a few moments before Evander asked where she would like to go. Arden answered that she needed to go to her mother, and that she had to reach her before anyone else did. Evander nodded and assured her that he would make sure no one disturbed her. Arden felt a strange mixture of gratitude and sadness. A stranger had just done what her own fiancé had failed to do. Her phone rang again. This time she answered. Lucan asked her to come back, saying that his mother was out of control and that everything had gone too far. Arden asked him directly whether he had tried to stop her. He replied that he had been trying to keep things calm. Arden told him that he had not been keeping peace but hiding instead. His voice cracked as he told her that he loved her. She replied that if that were true, he should have been waiting for her at the hospital. Then she hung up. Evander watched her with quiet respect and remarked that she had chosen herself. Arden nodded and said that she had to. The Rolls-Royce turned toward her mother's neighborhood. For the first time that day, Arden was no longer running toward a man who would not stand up for her. She was going home. When Arden arrived at her mother Eloan's small house, it felt as though she had stepped into a different world. The street was quiet. The air smelled of fresh grass instead of perfume and hotel carpets. Eloan opened the door the moment Arden stepped out of the car and pulled her into a tight embrace, telling her that she looked exhausted. Arden finally allowed herself to breathe. Later that evening, Lucan called again. This time, Arden answered on speaker so that Eloan could hear. Lucan pleaded with her, saying that he had never intended for things to turn out that way, and explaining that his mother had lost control. Eloan calmly asked him whether he had stood at the altar with another woman. After a pause, he admitted that he had. Eloan replied that he had already answered every question. Lucan insisted that they could still fix everything, saying that Seraphine was gone, and that the ceremony had not even been legally binding. Arden shook her head and told him that legality did not matter, because he had failed the only test that truly mattered. Lucan asked what test she meant. Arden explained that it was the test of whether he would stand beside her when things became difficult, and she told him that he had chosen to stand beside his mother instead. Lucan said nothing. Arden continued by reminding him that she had been saving a child's life, while he had been protecting his own comfort. Then she ended the call. Eloan took her hand and told her that she had done the right thing. Arden nodded and said that she knew. For the first time since the nightmare had begun, something inside her finally settled. Peace replaced the chaos. The Veilcrest family did not forgive or forget. 1 week after the failed wedding, Arden was summoned to a formal review at the hospital. The tone of the email alone made her heart sink. A formal complaint had been filed against her. She sat across from a panel of administrators and senior doctors, including Dr. Marlowe. Her professional file lay open on the table between them. One of the administrators began speaking, addressing her directly and informing her that the Veilcrest family had accused her of abandoning her professional responsibilities for personal gain, and of using a patient case to gain favor with a wealthy donor. Arden felt both anger and fear rise inside her. Her career was everything she had worked to build. She responded calmly, stating that the accusation was not true. She explained that every minute of the surgery had been recorded, and that her entire team had been present. Dr. Marlowe gave a small nod and confirmed that the documentation was under review. Later that same day, Evander Kessler arrived at the hospital. He provided a sworn statement detailing how Arden had saved his son's life, and how he had personally witnessed the Veilcrest family blocking her and humiliating her outside the hotel. The truth was clear and supported by evidence. The hospital dismissed the complaint. Coraline Veilcrest, however, was not finished. She began spreading rumors within social circles and across social media platforms, attempting to portray Arden as a selfish doctor who had abandoned her wedding simply to gain attention. Arden watched as her name was dragged through lies and half-truths. Evander called her and told her that he would handle the situation, adding that she should not have to fight it alone, and that he did not want her further dragged into it. Arden replied that she was already involved. Evander answered firmly that she had saved his son, and that he would stand beside her. Within a matter of days, legal notices were sent. The false stories stopped. Arden's name was officially cleared. At the hospital, her colleagues supported her openly. Patients expressed gratitude. The board offered her a leadership position on a trauma research team. The Veilcrest family lost more than a wedding. They lost their standing and reputation. As the storm began to fade, Arden finally allowed herself to slow down. She stayed with her mother, alone, and began experiencing what it felt like to live without constant pressure or fear. They cooked simple meals together. They watched old films. Sometimes they sat in silence, and that silence was enough. Eloan noticed the change in her daughter, and told her one evening that she looked lighter. Arden replied that she felt lighter, because she was no longer carrying the weight of other people's expectations. Evander Kessler kept a respectful distance, yet he did not disappear. He sent short messages asking how Eloan was feeling or reminding Arden to eat when she worked too long. One afternoon, he brought groceries to the house. Eloan thanked him politely but observed him carefully. She told him that she noticed he did not push. Evander answered that he respected Arden's life and her space. That response meant more to Eloan than anything else. Arden realized she was beginning to trust him, not because of what he provided, but because of how he behaved. There was no pressure, no demands, only steady presence. For the first time since her engagement had ended, she felt safe in her own space, something she had never truly experienced before. Evander and Arden did not rush into anything. They spoke openly about their pasts and the fears they still carried. He shared that he had lost his wife years earlier, and that the experience had taught him patience. She spoke about years of walking carefully around the Veilcrest family, constantly guarding her words and actions. One evening, Eloan watched them speaking quietly at the dinner table, and remarked that this man truly listened. Evander did not interrupt or attempt to solve every problem. He simply remained present. Arden noticed how different that felt. One afternoon, Evander told her something simple but powerful. He explained that he did not want to change who she was, and that he only wished to be someone she did not have to fear. Arden felt something shift within her. For the first time, love did not feel like a test she had to pass. It felt like rest. Lucan Veilcrest, meanwhile, did not recover from the fallout. The wedding scandal followed him everywhere. People whispered when he entered a room. The family name that once carried pride now carried embarrassment. Coraline attempted to explain the situation away, but few believed her. Lucan stopped attending social gatherings. The woman his mother had pressured him to marry left within weeks. Without Arden in his life, everything began to unravel. Arden, on the other hand, continued moving forward. Her work on the trauma research team gained recognition. She was invited to speak at medical conferences. Patients began requesting her by name. The same city that had once watched her be humiliated now respected her. One evening, she stood beside Eloan on the porch, watching the sunset. Eloan told her softly that she had lost a wedding but gained a life. Arden smiled and replied that she finally felt as though she was living her own. Evander joined them quietly. He remained silent for a moment before saying that he had never expected gratitude to bring him into someone's life in this way, but that he was thankful every day that he had met her. Arden looked at him, and this time she was not afraid of what she felt. She had learned something important. People who truly love you do not replace you. They wait. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Never abandon your values in order to be accepted. Never shrink yourself to keep someone who refuses to stand beside you. And never forget that the right people will recognize your worth, even when others attempt to bury it. If you have ever been betrayed at the moment you least expected it, share your story in the comments. And if this story gave you strength, please like and share it so that someone else can find their way back to themselves.